Defensive tackle. There's no position on the field like it. And if your team is not winning in the transfer portal, it's probably not going to win in 2026 either.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast a part of your day, each and every day, right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. We're going to be discussing one primary thing today: defensive tackles in the transfer portal. Xavier Gilliam from Penn State to Tennessee. Tionne, where's he going to go? Big Oregon defensive lineman. Terrance, another guy from Oregon. Where's he going to go? Francis Brewu, he's headed from Pittsburgh to Notre Dame. James Smith from Alabama to Ohio State, and more. But here's my take overall before we dive into the players. If your team is not hammering home the fact that it has to get at least one quality player, not necessarily a starter, but one quality player from the defensive trenches each and every year, it's probably not a program that's going to be very successful. Linemen leave early for the draft because they're so coveted, and a lot of teams try to induce players off your roster, and vice versa, to come play for them. Why? Defensive linemen change games. For instance, if Indiana loses to Miami, I can just about guarantee you how that script goes. The defensive ends from Miami had success in conjunction with the defensive tackle stuffing the run and actually getting some pressure on Fernando Mendoza as well. You're not going to beat Indiana unless Mendoza is flustered. You've got to get to him. Same thing at the NFL level. Look at the Super Bowl last year. Do you really think Mahomes all of a sudden wasn't good? Oh, by the way, the Eagles' defensive line was one of the greatest you're ever going to find at rushing the passer. Defensive tackle in particular was outstanding. That's how you win football games when you may not have the best quarterback or you may not have the best offensive situation, injuries, etc. The way you get around it is defensive line, and in particular, defensive tackle. There are only so many guys that are built mentally and physically in a manner to handle it. The guys down in the trenches that grunt and snort and are just a little bit different in how they tick. So let me go through a few of them and in general discuss why I think they can, or maybe they won't be as successful as some people might think. Let's start off with James Smith. He's from Alabama. He went to Montgomery Carver, ends up going up to play for Bama, and ends up now transferring after his third year to Ohio State. National recruit, 5-star guy, but he only had a few sacks and like 10 pressures this year, according to PFF. 6'3", 295, 300 pounds, somewhere in that range. Athletic, big body guy. He's always had the ability, but he hasn't hit that switch yet. He hasn't reached that level that I thought that he would. I thought he would be a 3-and-out guy. For him to be in the portal, it's a little bit surprising. Doesn't mean that he can't be really impactful this next year, and changing staffs, changing the defensive line coach, changing a little bit of everything that is going on. That's important. Maybe he just needs a new structure. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think that you're looking at a scenario where even if he just goes up a little bit, he's going to get drafted the first 3-4 rounds after next season, because you can't teach James Smith's frame and secondarily his lateral ability and all that. But how does that help Ohio State? Well, here's the deal. It's not like Ohio State's void of talent, but James Smith might be the guy that helps you from a rotational standpoint, whether he starts or he doesn't. Having another body like that when the other team doesn't have anybody like that, most likely, that's how you win. At the elitist of levels in college football, it's about the players. Yes, Saban was a great coach, but he was very mediocre at Michigan State, but not at LSU or Alabama. Why is that? No offense to Michigan State, but they don't get the same body types, consistently at least, that LSU or Alabama or many other programs get. Ohio State. And that's why Michigan State's usually a peg below. Saban goes to LSU, and all of a sudden he's a great coach. Saban moves on to the Dolphins, briefly goes to Bama, wins 6 more titles. It's insane. You can get different players at certain schools. James Smith is one of those guys that can change your outcome. Ohio State's used to that anyway, and now they get another piece like that to make a run at a 2026 national title. Now let's talk about Francis Brewu. He's going to Notre Dame, totally different kind of deal here because James is 6'3", about 300 pounds. Francis is 6'1", 6'2", 280, give or take. One gap, get up the field and go. Now, he could fend off a couple of guys because he's got really good hands. He's very aggressive, but he's going to Notre Dame in a super aggressive scheme. I like what they're doing. The defensive staff they have, it's starting to fit better. This should be the kind of guy that every team wants in some capacity. Again, it depends on your scheme. In a three-man front, traditional NFL two-gap scheme, Francis Brewu wouldn't be your guy. But in a one-gap attack, whether you're in a 3-3 stack or you're in a 4-3 traditional or 4-2-5, anything of that nature, yes. This is a player that now that he's around even more good players that are similar level to him, if not even better, like Boubacar Traore, the edge rusher for the Irish, he's not going to be the one that necessarily gets double teamed. One-on-one on third down and 6, Francis Brewu will be a dilemma for a lot of teams. And Notre Dame has enough depth. Elijah and some other guys they have up front, they're in a pretty good spot, but they don't have a dude. He might end up being the most important guy they signed this year because, again, there are just so few players that have the mentality and the frame to get down in there in the trenches and grunt and snort and take on big linemen that weigh 330. You've got to have a little bit of a different mentality. So I think that Francis will be part of that. Another guy that could be a two-gap guy for you and could play in a one-gap scheme as well, Terrance Green, and same with Tionne Gray, both from Oregon. I bring up both of them. Gray's about 6'6", 330. Terrance Green's about 6'5", 330. They're both in the portal. Those are guys like not just good players, but those are guys that could take that next step because Oregon had so much depth, they didn't even start. Both their D tackles are expected back at Oregon. They both play like 200-plus snaps. They rotated a lot at Oregon because they could. But now they want to be that main guy, that focus somewhere. Whether they go with Tosh Wupoy to Cal. He was a DC at Oregon. Now he's the head coach for Cal. Maybe they go there. Maybe they go somewhere else. They have different opportunities. Like Gray's originally from the St. Louis area. Maybe he goes back to the Midwest and plays for the Missouri Tigers. I have no idea. But that's a guy you can hang your hat on. Oregon was just that deep. So good for them. Same thing with Green. Like that's another guy, over 200 snaps, power player. Yeah, you could absolutely do something with him. And he's got, I believe, 2 years of eligibility. That's what you're looking for. Now, question for everybody out there. Just curious. Would you rather have somebody like Francis Brewu that's going to Notre Dame from Pittsburgh that's probably best in a one gap, get up the field and create havoc kind of scheme? Or would you rather have a two-gap scheme, kind of like what Saban ran? Very risky because getting these guys is not easy. Getting two-gap guys, playing the run, be a little more conservative, but just stuffing the run and forcing teams to throw the football. Because what you run dictates what you're going to do in terms of pass rush, blitzing, your coverages, the type of corners you sign, everything else. It's a really important decision, and it's not easy to rotate between the two. Although some teams will do it a little bit. Notre Dame will run some three-man, but they still run a lot of one gap out of that with blitzes and a lot of different looks. Everybody has their own scheme. But what do you want and why? I think that it's easier to run a four-man front than it is a three-man. But, man, if you can run it, if you can find a nose guard like a Green or somebody like that that can clog up the middle, especially out of the portal, yeah, that's a good year for you. You're not going to get that every year. So, again, Oregon has a couple of really good ones. And then we have Xavier Gilliam, played 1 year at Penn State. Defense corner in Penn State's going down to Tennessee. Jim Knowles, he gets Gilliam to go with him. He's like 6'2", 295, somewhere in that range. Maybe he's 300 pounds, but right in there. He's a guy that could probably play. If you really wanted him to, he could probably add a little bit of weight and be a two-gap guy. But he's best getting up the field, and that's what Knowles does. That's a steal. He's got 3 years of eligibility. Tennessee gets a really good football player there. When we come back, I want to talk about just one thing. What are you willing to do in terms of your NIL budget as it relates to players like Xavier Gilliam? Again, he's got like 3 years of eligibility. Are you ready to commit long-term to that? That is next here on the Portal Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get on the action every single day of the playoffs, because right now, every college football playoff to game day, of course, we got one of those on our NFL as well. FanDuel allows users a profit boost waiting for them in the app. So if you want to go with, like, Indiana, I believe is an 8.5-point favorite on FanDuel, at least that's what it was the last time I saw. You could ride with that, give the points, or you could go with the Canes, take the points. Maybe you want to play money line with one of them, whatever you want to do. But the profit boost is in there in the app on game day, regardless of your decision. When you apply it and you get even bigger winnings, you can even get FanDuel's payout instantly. That's a good thing for you anytime you're dealing with FanDuel. FanDuel is the best place to get on the action all playoff long. Visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff boost every single game day. All right. Thank you very much for checking out the show. And if you want to go into it even more, Locked On has the Everydayer Club for $50 a year or $5 a month. No ads on your audio. And there is a link down in the description to explain more, including the Discord, fans from all over checking out the chat and everything that's going on. Check out the Everydayer Club right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. NIL and defensive tackle. This is one of those situations that gets very touchy because D linemen are really expensive. I know there are a few guys, not a ton, but a few guys that went for over $1 million last year that I didn't necessarily think should, but then you just look at the old saying, supply and demand. Supply and demand, that's it. How many guys are out there that can fit your needs? Then how many teams need that same thing? Most often, it's going to be way more teams need defensive tackles than defensive tackles that are available at that level. It's not that there aren't some available, but so many of them end up busting. It's not even funny because, again, it's different being in the trenches, not just physically, but mentally. What you have to do in terms of your understanding of technique, taking to coaching, taking to the training table, taking to the opportunity to lift at a certain level, all those things, you need a lot of maturity. And some kids bust because they just don't have it. And they get passed over and they end up without a place to call home after they enter the portal. To that end, here is my question for you, no matter what team you root for. Answer in the chat, or if you listen to this later, comment on YouTube, etc. If your team has, let's say, $10 million left of their money, however you want to talk about it, whether it's coactive, whether it's the money the school gets from all the profit sharing, how much of that do you think yearly you should just kind of mentally put aside, say, defensive tackle? Almost everybody needs one every year. Like, it's outside of quarterback, the position that's probably talked about as much, if not more than any other. Maybe offensive tackle. It's a close race for second. Quarterback will always be number one. That's not a shock. But how much do you think you need to put aside? 10%, 15%? Because if you get caught in a situation where a guy turns pro and you weren't anticipating it, like he has a breakout junior year and leaves you, and then your other guy was a senior and you've got two players walking out the door, and you've got a roster that's really ready to rock otherwise, and you didn't set up enough money aside, that's going to be a problem. So I ask again, how much, if you had $10 million, 10%, 15%, that would probably only get you one player. That's how difficult some of these decisions are. General managers, head coaches, everybody on the staff, they have to think about this stuff. Like, what are we going to do? You can always get a booster last minute to come in there and help you. I get it. But at the same time, that's not a lock. You've got to plan accordingly. So think about this. Oregon, obviously loaded. They've got, by the way, Oregon has 5 defensive tackles in the portal, and they still have 2 starters and Aiden Brewu, who was a 5-star on the roster. You talk about hoarding defensive linemen. Holy cow. There are very few teams that recruit the position like they do. Probably the best over the last few years. To that end, who do you think has the best roster right now headed into next year at the D tackle spot? Oregon's still going to be really good. Ohio State, especially since they got James Smith, will be up there. Notre Dame's will be good, but I don't think it's quite on the level where Oregon or Ohio State necessarily are. It'll be good, but I don't know about their depth yet. We'll see. Tennessee probably be pretty good. Gilliam coming in will help. Bama, I'm not real sure what's going on with Bama. I'm a little concerned there. Auburn, iffy. LSU, young guys, their freshman group is insane. One of the best D-tackle recruiting classes of all time. Miami still got Justin Scott back after this next year. He's only a sophomore this year, so he can't turn pro. Georgia's, they didn't have anybody really burst through, but they still got a lot of players that are really good. For the record, they had 8 5-stars just on their defense this year. Clemson's lost some guys. I don't think they're on that level. It's a pretty wide open group from that perspective. Texas, they've got a couple of guys, but this is a little bit more difficult now because there's so much movement. It's hard for even me, somebody who studies the portal every single day, to sit there and say, well, this team definitively has the best group. It really does. Wild card for you. Ole Miss has got some young defensive linemen, and they're getting better and better. Do not count out the Rebels in that group as well. So there are a lot of different possibilities. We'll see how it works out. But whether your team does or does not have defensive tackles oftentimes really dictates how your season goes. Your quarterback's not on the field as much because teams are just running the ball down your throat. Your defense gets wore out. The back half of the season, you got guys in the lineup that probably shouldn't be yet. If you miss a defensive tackle, there's just no way around it. It's going to be a problem. Unfortunately, everybody knows it. Again, it's still supply and demand. To that end, it's probably not going to be very easy to see these numbers that some of these guys are commanding. It causes some chaos with the NIL. Katie, NC State got a guy named Dyson who is pretty good. I'll have to look it up. I'm not sure. Where's Dyson from? Terry Howell, 60%. Like, that seems high, but in some ways, if you're going to overspend on any spot other than quarterback, defensive tackle, look at Oregon. That's pretty good. Indiana hit on the transfer portal, like on some of their picks last year. It obviously worked out pretty good. Katie, I'd put aside 50%. You can also have injuries, and you need depth at defensive tackle. 100%. Teams without depth at defensive tackle are teams that get their heads handed to them on a platter. There's nothing worse than constantly seeing your defense in 3rd and 1s and 3rd and 2s. Because on first down, you're getting the ball run on you. Quarterback's not having the pocket collapse. If you don't have defensive tackles, those things just go all in all the time. 55% says Michael Parks. Michael Parks also says up the middle is most important. It's kind of like baseball. Catcher, pitcher, second base, shortstop, and center field. Those guys tend to go the highest in the MLB draft. And Edge from Tulane, Dyson. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm curious now about which team you think will spend the most. Let me give you an example. Katie's a Miami grad. I'll ask her, do you think Miami will go all in on one of these Oregon guys? Possibly. In my opinion, they certainly have the money to do it. But they've got Justin Scott back. But they're losing both edges. Ruben's going to turn pro. That's inevitable. And they're going to lose Akeem Messidor. I think Katie can answer this if she knows. But the other, Slay, is he done this year at Miami? If he is, that'd be 3 of their top 4. So it'd be more likely they'd at least try to get a DT. I've heard that's something they're trying to do. I know Florida State, they went after John Walker. He ended up at Ohio State along with James Smith. Like, that's a great one, too. I think Walker might be the better player. We'll see how that goes. Ohio State's set there. There's so many different guys that have hit in the portal and not, just depending on where they went for fit. So you got to think about that, too. The Oregon guys may not fit Miami quite as well, but you can still run a one tech and try to take up blocks if they went after a Terrance Green or Tionne Gray or something from Oregon. That's a possibility. What we got here? Any news on more Auburn additions? I actually spoke to Blackerby earlier today. I haven't heard anything. They're waiting on one other guy, but he didn't think they were going to get him. He said he expects a little more quiet for whatever that's worth. But as soon as we think that, somebody will enter the portal or somebody will take an offer from you that you didn't necessarily expect. That is the world of the transfer portal. So nothing I can really say about that other than welcome to 2026. The unexpected is the expected. I did see something that's kind of interesting, and Blackerby commented on this when I was talking to him. He says, there's a couple of different guys like starting to get in kind of late here. And we were just kind of hinting around like we were doing a pod for his Auburn show. Obviously, guys are getting induced offensive and defensive line because there just aren't enough of them. O-line, too, just like D-line. there may be somebody that's going to get in the portal today that really kind of changes things. For instance, I mean, Seaton's in the portal, the offensive tackle from Colorado. He's a 2-year starter at left tackle. He's, I think, asking around $2.5 million is what the rumor is. There's probably somebody like that would get in the portal. Just my guess. That's a defensive tackle somewhere in college football if they could get that offer as well. That's currently not in the portal. Doesn't mean that they won't be. They might do the deal behind closed doors, enter the portal with a quote unquote no contact tag, and then go to said school. That happens too. So it is what it is. Let's see what's Katie got. Yeah, Miami will go all in. Mario won't compromise in the trenches. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. What we got here? Seton visited Auburn during initial recruitment out of high school. They got 2 tackles already. I don't think Auburn will go that route. I know Oregon's involved. I don't know who all else is. Miami, their left tackle may go. I think he should. I think he's pretty good. At worst, I think he should be a second-round pick. I forget the kid's name, but he's 6'9", 360 pounds or whatever. He's a pretty good player. Trying to think anybody else off the top of my head that really should go, like the defensive tackle boards. They're always so short anyway. Also, the 2 West Virginia offensive linemen, Auburn now has their previous running backs coach. Oh, good to know. Thank you for that. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. But again, just the opening theme. Is your team getting defensive linemen, especially the D tackles? There are only so many of them. And the teams that do not get them, they're going to be the teams that most likely really suffer and don't have much of a chance at the college football playoff. Thank you once again for checking out the Portal Podcast. This is Brian Smith signing off. Everybody have a good day.